And welcome back to Coaching with the Bible. This week, the portion of A, our topic for this week on giving. I want you to think back for a moment to the last time you gave a gift. That could have been a monetary gift. That could have been just a present to someone. And I want you to, if you can, take a moment, unless you're driving, to close your eyes and think about what that felt like for you. How did it feel to give to someone else? What did that feel like? What did that do for you in the moment, in the after effect? How did that impact the next time you went about giving something or thought about giving something? And so the subject of giving is something I spend a lot of my time on. With respect to my work, on a day-to-day basis, I help organizations raise more money. And so I sort of swim in the ocean of content and material and research on the subject of giving. Why people give, how people give, when people give, what to say so that people will give and give more, how to ask. We talked about the exchange of the ask a few weeks ago. But the notion here of really delving into why it is that people give, there's a lot of research on the psychology of giving, such that organizations, of course, are using that research and benefiting from that research to appreciate the language and the words and the text and the imagery that they need to use to, I wouldn't say convince, but to get donors to support their causes. And it works. It's not different than in the consumer environment, and so why not in the nonprofit environment and the charitable environment as well? So giving is a really power subject. It's an enormous piece of the puzzle with respect to movements of money and economy in the world. Giving is everywhere. In the United States, an incredible amount of money is given on an annual basis through philanthropy and charity. It's in the hundreds of billions of dollars every single year across the spectrum. Other countries also. And it's almost embedded in the system, and it's almost part of the culture and the society itself, is what is called a culture of giving. And the Bible is not, apart from that either. It's certainly fundamental to the people of Israel, to the society that God wants the chosen people to build once they enter the land of Canaan into the land of Israel. At the core, at the heart of that society is a culture of giving, a culture of support, a culture of donating. Maimonides is quoted as saying that he couldn't think of a Jew. Do you know of a Jewish community that doesn't have a communal fund? I don't know where that quote's from, but it's certainly true. Every single one of the communities I've ever been part of, that I have ever worked in, it's a lot of different places in a lot of different parts of the United States and Israel and Canada and the United Kingdom and Switzerland, some other places as well. Every single Jewish community had some sort of a centralized communal fund that was, monitored and managed, and then for those who were in need, the opportunity to come and receive some of the philanthropy and the charity of the community to help them get through a day, a week, a month, a year, whatever that may be. And so that's at the core of who they are. And so the Bible this week exhorts the people and commands the people. Moses says it outright. The commandment is to give. And the commandment very specifically says as following. This is the 15th chapter of Deuteronomy. In the 7th verse of the 15th chapter, it says, if there is among you a person who is needy in your gates, in your city, in your land, don't harden your heart. Don't close your hand from your brother, from this needy brother, but rather open your hand and then give to that person. The commandment and the exhortation, the responsibility and the obligation is to give generously. Unfortunately, it's also true, and this I saw in another text as well. The question is raised as to why it is that when we fulfill the commitment of charity, we don't make a blessing before we do the act, as we do in many other cases in the Jewish community, where before we eat something, before we do other things, before we learn, before we study, there is a blessing that's recited. Before giving charity, there isn't one. And one of the commentaries stated the reason is because most people, unfortunately, when they're giving, are not giving with a full heart or with a smile on their face. It pains them to some degree to give. They don't feel good about it. And it's unfortunate, but it's true. The question sometimes even comes up, did I even do anything if I gave in a manner where I didn't feel good about the giving that I was doing? And there's something to that. What did I accomplish? What's the impact on me, the giver, irrespective of the impact on the person who's the recipient of that largesse and that act of donating? And so part of the question that we want to deal with, the Bible describes, is an appreciation of to the extent at which why that is so fundamental. One. Two, what really the impact is on a person, and in terms of their physical being, right? Why do people feel so good when they give? To sort of understand that, maybe unpack that a little bit more, and then really sort of take a moment to reflect here from the coaching standpoint about the benefits of giving. And so let's start actually with that. We discussed many weeks ago in Coaching with the Bible a concept that I think really applies here very, very well. We talked about early in Genesis about self-confidence. And one of the quote-unquote cures of a crisis of confidence was the opportunity the opportunity given to a person to help someone else, to give to someone else. And there's clear data in the science and in research that in giving to someone else reflects back and loops back to the person who's the giver. That in self-confidence space, where a person is feeling low about themselves, helping someone else actually energizes and refills their tank and gives them the opportunity then to do more. And so there's a very powerful notion with respect to a person in the giving space as to why a person should give. So again, there's the benefit of the person who's the recipient, but let's take a moment and think about why it is that the person should give for themselves. One, it is an energizer. It is a refueler of an empty tank. It is also the ability to restore a sense of confidence and goodness, positivity about a person for themselves. So there's a lot of that benefit that accrues to the person who is the giver, the donor. The reality beyond that is the opportunity in that space to give to someone else, and that giving could be anything. In the work, the Sefer HaChinuch is a book that delineates and defines all of the 613 commandments in the Bible. The author writes that the commandment to give is not just financial. And I talk about that a lot. When I talk about the term donor, I don't only mean someone who is giving money. It's someone who's giving time. It's someone who's giving their experience. It's someone who's sharing a kind word with someone. It's someone who's sharing their expertise. It doesn't have to be money. And thus the concept of donating and giving could be to somebody who's exceptionally wealthy, exceptionally bright, exceptionally talented, and the opposite, which is what we normally think about, is someone who is poor or weak or downtrodden or at the bottom of society. If you had to stop for a moment and calculate all of the kindness and goodness that people have done for you over the course of time, and had to calculate that from a monetary perspective, you couldn't afford it. That was a gift that someone gave me many years ago when I was in the rabbinate, and I had a gripe with some of my board members at the time. And he said to me, calculate for a minute all the volunteer hours that these people are spending to help you, with paid employee, do the work of this community. And then put a monetary number attached to that and realize that you could never afford to pay the people to do this work. And so getting it for free on a donation basis is a gift. It changes your perspective. And so the gift of giving, the opportunity to give, is a benefit perhaps even more so for the person who's the donor, the giver, than it is for the recipient. And the impact as to what it has in the person's body, so the impact on the brain is clear in the science, that it has that sort of a dopamine positivity hit. It opens neural pathways in the brain, in the limbic system, the same way that other things that we do that feel good for us, charity and giving fits into that space as well. It certainly contributes to mood enhancement and to a person feeling better about themselves, but also there is some data that seems to imply that actually gives you the opportunity to live longer, certainly feel happier. But the idea that perhaps there's a longevity factor in giving. So there's a lot of benefit that accrues to the person who gives. There's a lot of benefit to the society that gives. That, as Rabbi Sachs describes in an article on the subject in this week's Covenant and Conversation, that the term tzedakah, the Hebrew term that we translate into charity, in fact, that term is actually undefinable and untranslatable. And that it sort of is an amalgam of multiple things, and that at the core of society, beyond the justice, the legal justice, there's what he describes as distributive justice, the sense of sharing and caring for other people. That's that sense that the Bible is talking about. That's that core idea that is so fundamental to who we are. It's simply not just the idea that it's taking care of other people, which is certainly true, but that what God is exhorting of the people here is the notion at its core that the entire belief system fundamentally is a belief system that is rooted in giving. When we approach it from the religious sensibility, as the Netivot Shalom, a work we've mentioned multiple times here, a very master Hasidic work, is an understanding that from the religious perspective, everything belongs to God. And so if I'm a person of means, it's more that I am been gifted the means to then share those means with other people. And that when I determine not to share it, when I choose to say no, to not to give to someone, whatever that case may be, then in reality I am denying what it is that God has placed in my hands. It's a very different perspective on the entirety of giving. So whatever's in my pocket really isn't mine. I'm just the watchman of that largesse, of that financial wealth, of success. And really my job and responsibility is not to hold on to it, but is really to be distributive of it to society. Now, you have to be careful with it. You have to be mindful of it. You have to be smart about how you go about doing it. Of course, that's true. And certainly it goes without saying that with respect to the person, if it's a poor person coming to you to ask, to be over respectful of that person. I talk a lot about the times and situations, I used to talk about this more, where there were people who used to come to our home and I would say no. I feel terrible about it, but I would say no. And I wouldn't give them. And there was one gentleman who used to come to our home back in New York who came every week, and that was the rabbi at the synagogue, so he came every week. But even after I left being the rabbi at the synagogue, he still came. And I was admittedly hard on him, but he understood why. We discussed it, we talked about it. I wanted him to move on with his life. I wanted him to improve his life. I wanted his life to get better. And so we had actually set parameters for when it was that he could come. One thing was he had to try to get a job. And so he tried to get a job. Ultimately, he did. He ended up becoming a car service driver for a period of time. And then I started to give him more charity because I really felt like he was improving on his life. I was in no position to make those demands, but I really wanted his life to improve. But there were other people who used to come, and it's hard for me to say this out loud, but I'm saying it out loud. I would say no. Or even worse, if we told one of the children, just tell them I'm not home when you're literally standing in the next room. So not only are we not giving to that person, we're instilling that in our children not to give, and then lying as well, which just is sort of a compounding of falsities and falsehoods, which certainly is not a good thing and a good situation, does not create the society or the home that perhaps we want to create. There's a rabbi that I know, as I told you a lot. I speak a lot about rabbis because they're people that I know very well, and I'm inspired by many of them. When a person comes to his home to request charity, invites them in, sits down at the table, gives them a glass of water. He's very careful to give them a glass of water, not just a plastic cup, but a glass. It's a show of dignity. It's a show of respect. Thanking a person when they come to your home to ask. It's bizarre, it sounds like, to thank them for the opportunity to give, but think about it that way. It's an opportunity that they are giving you that you don't get other ways to improve your life simply by donating money. By giving of what it is that, again, from the religious perspective that God has given you, but even from a non-religious perspective, that society in some way has rewarded you for work done, whatever that may be, success, and so you share some of that with other people around you. And so what the Bible is imploring upon us is this notion of building the great society. And building the great society appreciates the realities on the ground, that sometimes you're up and sometimes you're down, and sometimes someone else is up and sometimes they are down. And so we are reminded many times in the Bible that we have to take care of the poor, we have to take care of the stranger, because we were strangers in a strange land. And the reality of it is, when we look at the person standing at our door who's asking for donations, for money to feed their family, to get a surgery, whatever it is, on some level, we have to appreciate that that also could be us. It's not, thankfully, but it could be. And so that could be a motivator for a person to give. There are many reasons to a person to want to give, to go into a space of giving, to become altruistic. We say it all the time. If the worst thing they ever say about you in the end of your time is that you gave away too much money to charity, that is not bad. That's a pretty good epitaph to have. He gave away a lot of his earnings, a lot of her earnings to charity, to people who came and asked. Can you imagine you develop relationships with people who come your way, who you'd never meet in a million years, who are coming to you because they believe that you can help them? Or again, in the religious sense, because God is directing them in your direction so that you could then become a more altruistic and a person who gives more, who gives better, who gives more positively. Those are all benefits that accrue to the giver more than they do to the recipient. And so why ultimately do people give? And this is sort of the last part of Coaching with the Bible this week. Why do people give? There's a lot of reasons. And they go up and down in terms of how we view them. Some people give because they feel guilty. And so they're covering their guilt by giving charity. It may not be the best reason, but it's certainly a reason. You know, for whatever reason, they feel bad that they have so much and they've been gifted so much, or they don't feel like they're undeserving. It's sort of an imposter syndrome sense about who they are. And so they give charity to sort of make them feel better, to sort of make that go away. It's soothing. We talked about soothing in the past as well. People give also for social status. It's a good thing to do. It's a cool thing to do in certain communities, in certain parts of the world. You know, it's positively viewed. And so by being an altruistic giving person who puts their name on buildings, a person who gives large donations purely for the social benefit, that's a thing. But perhaps there are 100 other ways as to why people give. There's an idea about the warm glow effect, the idea that's described, which is the sense of agency, a person choosing to give, a person deciding how much to give, where to give, when to give, how to give it, whatever that is, creates a sort of that warm glow, that real positive effect in the person, and that's the reason why they give. Perhaps the main reason why people give, and not tax benefits, that is a main reason why a lot of people do give, but the main reason that people give, I think, is impact. And after 18 plus minutes of talking here, talk about impact for a second. People want to have an impact on the world. That could be on a very small level with one person. It could be with one family. It could be with their community. It could be with their city. It could be on a certain group of people. But people want to have an impact in the world. They want to feel like that which they have or that which they've been blessed with is actually doing something for other people. And so we talk about impact. I talk a lot about impact with people working in fundraising and the language that they use around how they should talk to potential donors about impact. The power of their impact, the multiplicity and the X factor of their impact by their donations. Because that sense of impact, that sense of really accomplishing something in the world, that it's not just sitting there doing nothing, but it's actually moving something, helping people, moving society forward, is incredibly powerful and, more than anything else, incredibly meaningful. And beyond the fact that it's, of course, part of the covenant that we described earlier of the community, it pays itself forward as well, is this sense that perhaps that's what we're here for. We're here to have impact. We're here to make an impact on the world. We're here with a purpose and a meaning and a reason. And one of the ways in which we're able to do that is through giving. That is coaching with the Bible for this week. Look forward to seeing you next week.